amazing to be here. This is a really exciting topic to me personally. We're gonna jump right in. We're gonna do some brief introductions. I'll start and jump right into covering as many applications as possible here. So my name is Janice Brown. I'm currently the manager of education and outreach for a new complex in New York City called the R Lab, which is a New York City funded center for research and education and entrepreneurship that's focused on virtual and augmented realities, spatial computing, and emerging technologies around that space. My background is in audio and music supervision. I've done kind of everything in that space, from writing and content production to studio management, music supervision for commercials, and above all of that, I'm a huge music fan. So I thought we could do go down the line, everyone will introduce themselves, and also a quick icebreaker, which is just to tell us what was the most recent concert that you attended as a music fan, and what was memorable or maybe forgettable about it. So I'll start. When I came up with this question, I forgot that my most recent concert was pretty loaded. It was Bikini Kill. It was 2 weeks ago. And it was really awesome because it reminded me about all of the great things a live music experience can be, bringing together a community. It was this social, political, cultural moment, and at the same time, just raw and raucous and really, really special and memorable. Also memorable was that I'm much older now, and it was very loud. So I'll hand it off to Rich, and you can.
No problem. You stole my line. Hi, I'm Rich Tate. I'm the Director of Show Services at LMG. I have been in the industry for 25, 30 years, something like that, a very long time. It's funny, my last concert experience, we do have a touring division, and we have a lot of acts that are a part of the corporate shows. That's a big thing these days, is bringing in this high-end entertainment at corporate events. And one, yes, I am older, and it was very loud. But the other thing is, I cannot detach myself anymore and just enjoy a concert without staring at the rig and looking at the setup and looking at the lights. And I remember I took my daughter to Taylor Swift at one point back in Dallas several years ago, and partway through she goes, "Oh, Daddy, look, she's rigged. She's going to go up high somewhere." And I went, "I am so sorry. I am so sorry." She saw the wires and knew, and I was just like, now my kid can't even enjoy it, but I do love the industry, and I do love this topic, and I'm excited to be here today.
Thanks. Ben?
My name's Ben Basance. I'm with Idebri Consulting in Dallas. My role is designing large audio systems. So I guess I'm in the same boat that these guys are. Going to a concert as a fan of technology probably is more than anything the reason you'd get me to a concert these days. My most recent memorable one, I was fortunate enough to see Elton John's farewell tour through a venue that we've done a lot of work with. It was very memorable to me to see that technology, the video walls, the various audio aspects, the piano moving around the stage and stuff. Unfortunately, that was the part of the concert that shined. The performance was not quite where I had hoped it would be. But
it happens.
Yeah.
Cool. And Shane?
Hi, everyone. I'm Shane Murbeck. I'm with Arup in the Acoustics, Audiovisual, and Theater group in the San Francisco office. I also have a separate double life as a practicing sound artist and composer, and I work a lot in spatial media in that regard. The last concert I went to was Bjork's Cornucopia tour at the Shed, and that was special because I had the good fortune to work on the show. Designed an acoustic chamber that Bjork would take off her sound reinforcement mic and go inside and sing acoustically. She's touring with this thing throughout the Cornucopia tour, so that was pretty special.
In case we don't get back to that topic, could I ask for a slide just to show an image of that? It's slide 46. That's the echo chamber that Shane designed for Bjork, which is pretty amazing. So, I thought we would jump right into immersive, and talk a bit about kind of what we're talking about when we talk about immersive. What are the different kinds of definitions of immersive in different applications? And maybe through that, get to some examples. So Shane, maybe we could start with you. I know that you've done a lot of work in immersive, both as an artist and as a designer. How would you answer that question? I mean, what are the different ways we can think about immersive?
Yeah, I think there's, in one sense, it's a technology that at its best can hopefully disappear, right? Because it's creating an experience, an environment that at its best is very natural, right? So it relies on spatial hearing, which is what we do instinctively. Like it relies on kind of like our kind of core experiences as humans. So the kind of ideal state of it in my mind is that, it's not a showcase of technology, that slips away, and that it can be just a transposition of a natural experience. So one of the things we do at Arup is we have a room called the Sound Lab, which is it started as an ambisonic room, and it's kind of evolved into a lot of different things since then. But we use that as a way to simulate acoustic environments. So either through building a 3D computer model to get acoustic output, or taking a 3D recording with all the various ambisonic and other type of spatial microarrays. We can construct an acoustic environment and design from that. So it's kind of like a 3D design studio in that way. And so for a long time, spatial audio existed in that way. It was kind of ad hoc, and it had to be, each thing had to be constructed and anew, and had to be kind of like coded in terms of the interface. But what I think is really exciting now is that we have all these systems that are products that can be kind of purchased as a not quite turnkey, but as a system, and then operated and installed with a pretty slick user interface. So I think that's an interesting trend.
Cool, and I do want to come back to the Sound Lab. I want to hear from you guys what your thoughts about that as well, based on experience with projects, like what clients tend to mean. I know, Ben, you worked on a higher ed project where immersive meant transparent. So if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that'd be great. We worked on Harvard Business School's new Klarman Hall, which is for their School of Business. Now, one of the things that Harvard as an institution is working really hard to do is eliminate the wall between the teacher and the students that are in the class. It's two-way communication. It's not Sage on the stage preaching to the students anymore. But that creates a really big challenge, because how do you come up with a lecture hall where you can easily do that? So that was the challenge we set out to solve. The hall, and I think we have a picture of it. If we could pull that up for context.
Let's see, that's slide 44, please.
It's 1,100 seats. And the really cool part about this room is you have the ability, as someone sitting up in the far balcony, to stand up with your normal voice, ask a question, and everyone else in the room can hear what you've said. You can have a conversation with the professor even though you're 100 feet away. And that to us is one of the cool things that this immersive technology is doing. You don't know that it's there, but you can easily communicate. It's breaking down barriers and dramatically changing the user experience.
Were you using, or did you use what you would call new technologies in this design, or was it more kind of applying existing technologies to a new concept for designing?
I think it was a bit of both. There were certainly some, there's advances in DSP that are out there now are letting us do all sorts of crazy things. From shipping the audio signals around with the various IP protocols in ways that if you were going through a bunch of D to A's and A to D's, you wouldn't be able to do that in real time. Because I can't have someone stand up in the balcony and ask a question, and then 30 seconds later it comes out the speakers. That's not natural. So certainly the computing power that we were able to apply was a huge key in making it work.
Cool. And Rich, I mean, what's your take on this kind of big topic of immersive audio?
Yeah, it's thank you. It's really interesting because when we're talking about immersive, our clients could be talking about an overall immersive experience. One of the things I'm going to go through today a little bit is the L Acoustics ELISA system. and they define immersive as when the sound is above and behind you. We can be in that system, they call it hyper-real, as you're talking about adding speakers across the front of the audience, but they won't call it immersive until it gets above you and behind you. They're very particular about that. But immersive can be defined as being hidden or being, that you don't know the technologies around you. The magic of the ELISA system is what you just talked about. It's processing and computing power and capabilities, what we can do with the sound. The black boxes really haven't changed that much. It's just what we do with them and how we utilize them. The fact that we can split 18, 20, 32, 64 signals and send them to individual speakers to give you a different experience, to track a speaker. I believe you talked a little bit about how we listen spatially. One of the neat things about this immersive audio and hyperreal audio is the audience can perceive the sound coming from where the speaker is, not just through the speaker system. So there's a lot of really fascinating and interesting things we can do, and it's all because of that computing power and what we can do with the digital signals.
I do think it's interesting that we're talking about a lot of labs. The Sound Lab at Arup, I'd love to hear more. I think it might be interesting to look at that and see, Shane, it probably started out as something that was way more experimental in nature, and I'm wondering now if it's being kind of used to model a wider variety of projects, more projects. It sounds like you have multiple sound labs around the world.
Yeah, so it started out somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago, depending on who you asked, just as a communication tool. So like in our role as acoustic consultants, as everyone knows, talking about sound can be challenging to the non-expert. So we set up a studio that was a way to communicate designs of, started off with kind of sound isolation, evolved into more concert hall level acoustic design, and then has kind of sprung from there into many, many different things. So yeah, it started in tandem in New York and London.
May I have your attention, please? Disregard any current audio or visual alarms. There is no emergency at this time. Corrective action is being taken to clear the alarms as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Su atención, por favor. No presten atención a ninguna alarma audible o visible. En estos momentos no hay ninguna emergencia. Acciones correctivas están siendo implementadas para apagar las alarmas lo más pronto posible. Gracias.
All right, it's official.
All right. So yes, we have sound labs in New York, San Francisco, LA, Chicago, Seattle, Sydney, Melbourne, Singapore, Hong Kong, Glasgow, Leeds, London, Manchester, and Amsterdam. Probably missed one, but so it's everyone throughout Arup, we share a lot of resources, and we still do the computer modeling that was kind of the basis of it. But it started as an ambisonic sound studio. So ambisonics is very kind of studio based. It's very listener based. It's a way of reconstructing a sound field to a certain position or kind of a small sweet area, as they call it. It doesn't, ambisonics doesn't really work at scale. You can't really use it as a performance tool because it is kind of defined to such a small area. So more and more the Sound Lab has kept that ambisonic kind of backbone, but then evolved more into a place to produce the more kind of vector-based panning of ELISA or of Atmos or of the D&B Soundscape or the Meyer Dimitri systems. So we use it as as both the simulation and design studio, but also a production studio to be able to move through those platforms.
Cool, and I mean, obviously Bjork is always at the cutting edge of technology and art, but can you tell us about some other applications, perhaps in other areas outside of live music? Yeah,
well, I mean, maybe to talk about the Bjork thing a little bit and the process of how we use the Sound Lab there. Basically, she wanted to optimize the shape of that chamber to sound as good as it possibly could. So the Sound Lab process was to take 25 different shapes or something and model each of them. and she actually gave us a dry track from her record, so just the dry vocal track, then gave us the track with the reverb send bounced, and then just the reverb send on its own, so we could kind of compare the digital production reverb she was using to what our model was outputting. So it was a way to take, like, because the palette of shapes that Bjork originally that we were originally talking about with her were quite vast. They were constrained a bit by size, but it was just a lot of different things. So we were able to render all those shapes and then send her versions of those over headphones where she could listen to in her studio in Reykjavik, and then eventually meet up in London to kind of listen in the 3D sound studio once we had refined it to a few different shapes. So I think that's a good example of how we would typically use the Sound Lab in a design context. It's not always Bjork, unfortunately. That would be nice. But if we have like a airport terminal or something, and there are 4 different options for acoustic treatment or different type of sound system typologies, we could model those in the same way, and the client can select, kind of from a menu of sound options based on that.
Thank you. Ben, we'd love to hear more about just any other applications from IDBRI that kind of are getting into the immersive space.
Yeah, one thing that interesting example we had just the other day on the acoustic side of our projects, a client was saying, well, why do I care if my room's an NC 40, I think it was, and not the 25 or 30 that we were recommending? And we brought in the client and put them in a space where they were immersed in what does it sound like when your air conditioner's noisy. And as simple of a thing as that could be, it proved to be a very valuable tool, because now we could concretely say to the client, yes, the thousands of dollars we're telling you to spend on these silencers actually matter. So that was a really simple yet effective way to do it. And that's all because we have this immersive space that we can let people play around in.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like an important part of the picture right now, having that space to be able to bring
very
people
much
in.
so. And if, like with the Elisa system, if your studio's, obnoxiously loud, well, who cares about your immersive technology at that point? So just being able to even simply demonstrate to a client why you need to have these bits of technology aligned in the first place, even just starts to enable that technology.
Mm-hmm. Just to zoom out a little bit on the concept of disruptive audio technologies, interested in talking a little bit about how we're seeing sort of design requirements shifting and challenging the way we do things. I know in a previous conversation we talked a bit about people wanting, not wanting anyone to see the speakers, or, prioritizing screens and things like that. So interested in just some recent examples of just changing design requirements.
I can do a quick one and see what the guys have to say. Quick question for the audience. Who here has ever seen a gorgeous render for a show with line array hanging down in front of the screens? Right, exactly. We have a couple of different applications we've been asked for. And luckily, I did say earlier the little black boxes haven't changed. I guess they have gotten littler and more powerful. We do have some different designs. The way they work and the way they function really isn't different. One of the things we've done quite often recently, especially around election time, is discrete audio, speakers under the seats. So we have all these little 5XTs that we deploy under all the chairs because they want the people on stage and the screens to be primary, and they also don't want to hear audio bleeding through on the broadcast. So when these things are being broadcast and it's on national television or on, I almost said cable, that's not even a thing anymore really, but on these other channels, they want that discrete audio. So we'll deploy audio under the audience and have a lot of control over that sound field and how loud it is and where it is. We've also gone a lot further recently with trying to incorporate smaller, more powerful speakers into the truss and trying to, that's the other thing, how many people go into rooms with very low ceilings and they don't want speakers on sticks and they don't want line array on a stand. So we're trying to hide the speakers, if you will, in the truss, especially anything over the front of the audience. So there are applications and there's things we can do to be more immersive and hide the audio when they want the screens and the visuals to be more prominent.
Anyone else have comments on that?
Yeah, one of the, because if you have a, an LED wall or whatever at a few thousand nits or however bright they are, and it's an immersive theater space, you can black out, you can hide speakers easily just with lighting, right? One of the more challenging ones is in like the concert venues, the performance venues that are ostensibly acoustic, but actually have like a Meyer constellation or an acoustic system or one of the other versions of those acoustic enhancement systems, where the audience is meant to think that they're in this kind of pure acoustic space, right? But in fact, there are anywhere between 60 and 150 loudspeakers hidden behind fabrics and things. So we did a space for the SF Opera where it's like this little kind of jewel box room of about 300 seats, and it's in the old. It used to be where they put the statues in SF MoMA, the original location of SF MoMA. So it's meant to be this it has this opulent crown molding type of thing, and it's it's all the surfaces are projectable. There are 64 loudspeakers hidden behind these things, but you're meant to go in there and have this pure experience. So that's often more of the challenge when people are not meant to see any of the technology.
Ben, do you want to touch on that at all? Just changing, shifting asks from the clients that's affecting the
Yeah,
design.
I would say arguably one of the biggest disruptors for audio technology is architects saying, I don't want to see it. And we've all been there, we all deal with that. But thankfully with the advances in technology, like you were talking about more smaller speakers, we're also getting smaller yet louder speakers that are allowing us to, maybe that line array doesn't have to be 8 feet tall, maybe it can be 6 feet tall, but still get the same output. That's certainly something we're dealing with. And thankfully, technology keeps shrinking. You mentioned the black boxes, thankfully they're getting cheaper. They're getting easier to deploy for us. So a client doesn't have to fork over both space in the size of, a massive room full of gear to have all of this stuff processed. But also in their budgets. They can actually afford it now. I mean, we probably could have done some of this cool technology with the Lisa style things many years ago, but no one was going to pay to take that a dollar amount of technology on the road with them, let alone have something that could do it in real time.
The bigger topic today of IP, interested in talking about just where you're seeing the IP addressable speaker technology starting to come into play, what kinds of applications, and if it gets to sort of personalized audio experiences.
Yeah, as was mentioned in the introductory talk, if you want to do 64, 128 channels, you probably should have a networked audio system. But often it's still all at the amp rack and the DSP, and then a lot of systems we do are sometimes passive, or it's we'll have the audio and the low voltage and the same cable or that sort of thing. So at the speaker, it all depends. In a studio context, that can worry me sometimes because of noise in the studio if you're designing an NC20 space or something. So in that case, I would probably put the amps elsewhere. But yeah, I think I think networked is a foregone conclusion in these systems at this point. But it's kind of choose your poison as whether it's at the speaker or just in the amps and the DSP.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And what about just the concept more of sort of directional audio and personalization?
The holoplot stuff.
It sounds like maybe some of these things are not happening quite yet. But
yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff happening. So this is with a beamforming loudspeaker technology. So we have ambisonics was kind of theorized in the 60s, and then in the 90s or so, out of Finland came this idea of vector-based panning. So you could have a 3D loudspeaker array, but use, basically pairwise panning like you have in a stereo system, just in a triangle. And then if you have a lot of triangles, you can get sound anywhere. So that's what a lot of the, the Atmoses and the Elises are using. But I think there's another trend in terms of the, the beamforming loudspeakers and some of the ultrasonic loudspeakers where you can have a very highly directed experience. And I think we're just, those are the projects we're working on and those capacities are all under NDA, unfortunately, so you can't talk too much about them, but I think there's a lot of promise in terms of like creating a truly dynamic and varied soundscape. And you can do that in a way where you can actually place audio in a certain point in the room so everyone can kind of like navigate toward that area and experience that. And the effect is quite uncanny. It's really cool. But it's still, implementing that at scale is still kind of in the R&D world.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about performing arts spaces that are under NDA, or are they venues? Are they?
Yeah, there are a couple venues, and then I was actually talking to like an autonomous vehicle manufacturer that's employing some of these technologies for pedestrian alert signals.
Oh,
So being able to like identify, like an autonomous vehicle is more tricked out with sensors than anything I can think of, right? So you could like take a video feed, apply your AI to it and identify like what the pedestrian was, whether they were on their phone, whether they were blind with a cane, and then alert them specifically. So.
Cool. I'm not sure where we're landing on time because of our emergency moment, but I have one more question. Just wanted to kind of looking forward, what do you guys see sort of driving innovation in this space? Is it the particular, audio technologies? Is it the, artist's imagination? Is it kind of more piecing together components and coming up with a really cool kind of user experience for the engineer? Some of these new systems that exist. What do you guys think? What's driving things forward?
I think that our home living rooms are pushing the envelope as much as anything else is, because people can sit in your living room and let's be honest, it's cheap to have a 5.1, 7.1, even a small Atmos system in your living room now. And so promoters are trying to figure out, how do I bring that experience to a large-scale live event? People get good audio when they sit in their house and they didn't buy a ticket to the show. You need to incentivize me to go to that show and really have that user experience. It's all about ratcheting up that user experience. And as the user experience in our everyday lives gets better, I need more positive user experience in a venue just to keep people coming.
I call that the Best Buy effect. So as
Agreed.
long as Best Buy is still in business, that applies. But we do. For us, it's user experience as much as anything else. The innovation gets driven a lot from the artist and from the technology companies, but it's to fill that need of the user experience. We all talk about experiential as a thing. It's not just a buzzword anymore. That's what we talk about when we're either in an exhibit space or a corporate environment or an arena, and they really aren't discounting any part of the user experience anymore. Just because you're in the cheap seats, they don't want to discount that part of the experience. You should have as good of an experience as somebody down close, and they want to really make it immersive in that sense for the whole audience.
Shane?
Yeah,
Any final
I think content, but I think content drives it, but in the context of like of creative literacy with the technologies and with the formats. I think like, because I came from the recording studio world too, and like, in the mid 2000s, like everyone was kind of bemoaning the loss of quality audio, right? And it was like, oh, what's happening? Everyone's listening to earbuds and MP3s. Like no one knows what good audio sounds like anymore. And like we have this capability. I mean, these venues are popping up with like, 128 channel D&B systems, right? I mean, that's a pretty amazing audio experience, right? And I think that the musicians and the artists that are creating that content are just starting to get the type of literacy that's going to really blow people's minds. But my kind of hopeful view of the future is that like you start to develop those experiences that are just like this immersive live performance event that can't be had anywhere else. And that's an exciting thought.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited about.